Hi everyone, my name's Amit Katwala. I'm a writer and editor at Wired magazine, and I'm delighted to be here for this panel on shaping the future, where we're going to be talking about sustainable shipping and freighting with Einride. I'm delighted to be joined by Linnéa, Kornehed, Falck, who's the CMO, Deputy CEO, and founder of Einride. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, can you start by telling us what problem Einride has been set up to try and solve? What's the issue here?
I think the most maybe obvious one is the green transition for transportation logistics to be sustainable. We have a challenge that road freight is accountable for about 8% of the global CO2 emissions, and that's what we're here trying to solve.
So tell us about your approach to tackling that problem, because it's a combination of a few different things: electric, autonomous, and then some digitalization as well.
This is the million-dollar questions, to try to explain this in a very simple way. But what you could say is that we're taking an approach where we're redesigning the whole ecosystem of how this is possible. And I think it's important to know that when you're working with electricity, it's such a fundamentally different technology than diesel. And so when you design for this type of system to work, you need to work with a lot of other components. And so what we're doing is that we're building up an infrastructure and a platform to be able to drive electric and sustainable in a cost-competitive way.
So what does that look like in practice? What service are you offering companies? If a company comes to you and says, we want to move this product from A to B, what can you offer them today, and what will you be able to offer them in the future?
So what we start with is that we always start to talk about ambition. So a lot of the companies that we are working with, they're these really huge companies, and usually they have an ambition that they want to go carbon neutral until like 2030 or 2035. And so what we start with is to look for, okay, so you have this ambition. If you want to get there, this is what we need to do to be able to get there together. And so we start by looking at that. And then, of course, what we're enabling with autonomous is, of course, also for over time, how you can work with new technology and innovations to be competitive also for the shippers that we're working with. And I think, the digital aspect of all of this comes together because it's nearly impossible to go electric and electric autonomous if you're not digital. And this is one of the industries that hasn't really gone through the digitalization phase yet. And so what we're providing the customer with is a freight as a service model where we are contracted 5 years, and we look into this plan that we set together, starting off with just a small project like maybe 1 to 3 trucks to start with, and then scaling together with the clients.
So you're not providing your own trucks, really. You're not providing your own drivers. It's more about linking drivers and linking trucks.
It's the service. Yeah, we take a responsibility from moving end to end.
Yeah, and I guess it's because people think about, electrification and autonomous as being sort of technologies, but actually a lot of the gains that you get come from digitalization, right? If you can make your use of the resources that you have more efficient by sharing one truck across multiple different companies, then that makes a big difference.
Exactly, and as of today, that's the only way to make electrification cost competitive to diesel. And so it becomes one of these huge, going electric, it's very complex. And a very good thing with diesel is that it's actually pretty easy if you would compare it. But that's the great thing when you start to work with an operating system and you're going digital, is that you get all of this understanding for how to plan. And just to give an example, the average filling rate of a truck today is below 20%, meaning that most trucks that you will see out there actually runs empty. And so there's a huge potential for efficiency gains, of course, in this.
We have the same conversation about cars and how 99% of the time a car is just sitting there parked with no one using it. It's a parallel discussion, really. But maybe it's not immediately obvious why autonomy also contributes towards efficiency and energy savings. Can you talk us through why that is and why you're pursuing autonomy as part of a means of driving down costs and driving up environmental friendliness?
Absolutely. And this also breaks down to the cost and the cost of utilization. And so you would have a utilization rate today of a truck also around 20%. And of course, if you remove the driver from that equation, you will have an uptick in utilization. And the good thing with that is that you could actually have vehicles serving 24/7, right? And then the only downtime you would have would be when you're actually charging. And so this would really, redraw the whole way how you're thinking about transport. And I think that's also what our clients are seeing. And when they start working with us, is that one, they want to go sustainable, but two, they also really want to take the advantage of new technologies that's coming out.
Are they willing to pay a premium to go sustainable at the moment, or is it something that they're looking at as because obviously this is a very sensitive part of the business, right? If you're shipping stuff, a small increase in cost can actually add up quite a lot, right?
I mean, we see a lot of clients that are willing to pay a premium also to be leading in this. And then, of course, a lot of big companies also see these new policies coming out or new taxes for being taxed for driving fossil-fueled vehicles. So we see a lot of that. But where we are today with a bit of a downturn, of course, we're also seeing that also big companies are pushing their commitment for when to go sustainable.
One of the concerns that I might have if I was running a large company, which obviously I'm not, but it's possible one day, is about capacity in the system at the moment. Like, is there enough electric freight capacity to actually supply my needs and supply them flexibly?
That's our problem, right? So that's what, when we are offering our service to the clients, what we are saying, we are going to provide you with the sustainable and cost-competitive freight, and then we need to solve the supply side of things. But we do work with many of the biggest truck manufacturers today, both in the US and in Europe, and also coming out of China. And so we, to my understanding today, we are the biggest buyer of electric trucks in the world.
Yeah. So you do run a fleet of electric trucks that you decide how to portion those out to the various clients depending on what jobs you need. Can you tell me a bit about what companies you are working with currently and what sorts of things you're doing for them?
Yeah, we launched here in the UK just this spring, and here we're working together with PepsiCo. So we're very excited about that. We're working within it's called the Golden Logistics Triangle, right? Yeah. And I'm trying to rebrand that to say it should be called the Green Logistics Triangle. Yeah. We'll see if that sticks. So we're very excited about that partnership. And of course, serving for walkers, which is a big thing here. We understood. Yeah. It's we're working together with Oatly, Lidl, Kaufland. Yeah. So we're live we launched in 8 different markets. We're live in 6 markets and have a plan to enter the other markets as well. So it's we can really see a big traction for what we're offering. Yeah.
For those that aren't aware, the Golden Triangle is an area of the UK where a lot of warehouses are based because it's kind of equal distance to, basically any populated area in the UK. It's somewhere around Northampton, I think. I'm not entirely sure what the 3 points of the triangle are, but yeah. So it's a good place to be if you're in freight.
Yes.
Can you tell me a bit about the autonomous aspect of it? Because I guess that's the bit that grabs the headlines, and maybe what most people might have heard of Einride for is this autonomous vehicles that you've been working on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the most exciting part, right? Or at least that's what it seems when we're talking to clients. When we started the company in 2016, there wasn't, the current narrative at that time was that electric trucks would never happen. And now we're talking about conventional electric trucks, that would not going to happen because the batteries would be too heavy. You wouldn't be able to find good economics to transform to electric trucks. And when you talked about self-driving and autonomous, that was that's going to be in 50 years. It's going to be, we don't even want to think about it. And what we set up from the start was that we wanted to create this operating system, taking a lot of inspirations from the AGV system, that's the autonomous electric systems that you have within factories, right? And so we draw a lot of inspiration from that, and we just wanted to put that outside of the warehouses. And when we started to pitch that to clients, they were just looking like big question marks, like operating system for what? Electric, it was so far off. But what we knew was that the technology was coming and it was maturing very fast. And so we set up that we need to create some kind of like visualization of where this industry is going. We need to create a visualization of this new technology that's going to be available very soon. And so we created what was known as the pod. Today it's known as the autonomous electric vehicle. And we went out and we showed that to customers. And everyone was like, yeah, we want one of those. And so that completely changed the narrative, I think. And I think the vehicle became everyone's darling. And I think that still we're, of course, very proud, and we are also operating with them. I must say we have them live and operating in the US for General Electric appliances, and also one case for SKF in Sweden. And so they are operating. They're not out on public roads. It's just part public road for one of them in the US. But I mean, it's a technology. It's maturing.
I guess it's one of those things where actually the truth of solving this problem will probably be more about digitalization and resource management than it will be about maybe more exciting stuff like self-driving cars, but maybe it helps if it gets companies in the door to then talk about the rest of the stuff you can offer.
Yeah, but I must be super also honest with that. I think that we really see an autonomous future because there's so much problems in today's market. We have a huge driver shortage globally. I mean, this is becoming a real, and especially I'm sure you know here in London, you had such a huge problem with this 2 years ago that you had to bring in the military, right? And so we have a huge problem, and it's no wonder why it's like that, because it's one of the most dangerous jobs out there. It's a low margin type of job, and the new generation, they don't want to be truck drivers. And so this industry will have to change somehow. And I truly believe in technology, and I mean, if we want to create a better society moving forward, we need to also adapt to new technologies. And so I'm a firm believer in that, and autonomous can really play a huge role in that.
Are there bigger safety concerns when it comes to freight? I mean, we've seen in San Francisco with like cruise cars and other Waymo and other things like that getting kind of stuck in intersections and in some sad cases even hitting pedestrians. With a big truck, is that more of a concern? Is the road to bringing this into the real world going to be longer, and because of all the safety hurdles you're going to have to go over?
I think this is what I'm a big believer in. I think when it comes to autonomous cars, I mean, we must also be open with that. Autonomous functionalities in cars has already saved millions of lives. So we shouldn't forget about that fact. But when it comes to transportation of freight, the really great thing with that is that freight and these flows are usually actually pretty boring. I mean, they're very repetitive. They're hopefully reliable. I mean, if you're a shipper, you don't want your goods to be on the other side of town if it's supposed to be here right at this minute, because it's such a crucial part of your business. And so autonomous is actually a great case for that, because you have these like very repetitive flows going back and forth. You don't have to go high speed, because if you don't have the labor cost of a vehicle, you don't have to be in a rush to fill all of that deliveries in that 8-hour span. You can actually have the 24/7, and you can charge when you load and when you unload. And so there's a lot of great benefits. And when it comes from a safety perspective, the great thing is that, and this is also how we have been able to be the first to get the approval and the permit to drive on public road, first in Sweden and then in the US. It's because we're going to the authorities and we're saying, we're just going to go on this lane, this route, from A to B. We're not going anywhere else. And so what we can do is that we can drive with our car to start with, gathering a lot of data for this specific, run it in our simulations, start with have it follow a car to make sure that we know it really limits the complexity of the lane. So if you would have a car and you want to go autonomous, you want to be able to go everywhere. And I think, even for you, I think you would be pretty not happy if you had a car. You can only go to your home and to your work just between those locations. I mean, that wouldn't be a great selling point for an autonomous car, because you as a human, you want to be able to go anywhere. You want to be able to this weekend, let's go to across the country. But you don't want that with logistics.
Definitely. I just want to remind people that if they have questions for Linnéa, they can add them on Slido, and I'll get them up on the iPad here, and we can ask a few at the end. We've got about 5 minutes left. I wanted to ask you, have you looked at teledriving as a kind of bridging solution? So this is where a truck is remotely controlled by a human operator sitting in a call center somewhere. A few startups are trying this. Is this something you've looked at?
Yeah, we are doing that as well. Yeah. We've been doing that for a few years now. And that goes back to our thinking about autonomous solution is that we believe that you should limit the complexity of the route that you're going, and that you will always have a human in the loop. But what you can see over time is, of course, that you would like to have one remote operator to several vehicles.
Yeah.
But that's something that we're working with, and we've been able to showcase. We were in Barcelona. We brought our remote station, and we had one of our vehicles in Sweden, and we let actually visitors drive one of the vehicles from Barcelona.
And that has a lot of benefits from the labor side of things as well, because it makes driving a truck a much more of a nice proposition for someone with a family, because they can kind of do it from a fixed location and they don't have to be away so much.
Exactly, it makes it. We actually run a survey on that, and what you could see was that even for people that would not consider being truck drivers, this became an attractive position, which is of course great.
So what are some of the hurdles? Because obviously there's autonomy and getting that right, but then there's also some development that needs to be done in the terms of battery technology as well, right?
Yeah. So sorry, the hurdles in
getting battery technology to where it needs to be, because right now my sense is that battery technology will struggle with some of the heavier loads and those longer distances, and it's maybe not so good at, because batteries themselves are so heavy, it's not so good at this kind of freight application.
I think we disagree on that. I think it's, again, coming back to the use case. And I think when you've been reading up on this, you've been taking the approach that you should be able to drive these really long distances, while in fact, most of the use cases are mid-range. So you don't actually have to. And the great thing when you're going for an electric vehicles is that you can charge at the customer site. Yeah. So you don't have to go charge somewhere else. You can actually charge when you load and unload the truck. And there's a lot of ways. And this is something that when we initiate a conversation with the client, we look into where would be the most suitable place to go electric right now, both in terms of the range, in terms of what are you carrying, because if you're carrying frozen goods, you're gonna need more energy than if you're carrying dry goods. And this is something that when we talk about the digitalization, but also our operating system, this is all being done in the operating system to understand what right. I mean, even if you're going uphill, and I'm sure that you've also seen this when you've been trying out. I think there was a case with, I don't dare to say the name, but one of the bigger electric truck manufacturers that say we can go, I think it was 500 kilometers, but if it was downhill. Right? and so that really varies also. And that's something that we take into account when we start to look into this and we assess this with the customer. Where are you going? What's the weather situation? What type of goods are you carrying? And there's just a bunch of these different data points going in.
Yeah. We've got time for probably one or two questions from the crowd. Thanks for asking them, guys. One is, what are the advantages of electrifying or automating truck freight versus, say, improvements to rail infrastructure?
Oh, that's a good one. I think, it's one of them is cost, because we already have a lot of infrastructure in place for electric. The only thing that we need to add is the charging infrastructure. If you're going to build rail, it's fairly expensive, but I will say for some cases it's great with rail. And so I think everything is just that. I don't think it's going to be one technology that's going to solve everything. I think that diesel is still great for some applications, and it's actually more sustainable also in some applications, but not everywhere. And what we can see when we run these simulations is that it varies a lot. And so I don't think you're going to have a silver bullet that's going to save all our problems. But so we need to have a holistic approach.
So final question from me then is, how do you see this industry changing in the future? Where will we be in 10 years or 20 years?
Oh, I think it's starting to really take off now. I think we've been working with this now for 7 years, but the traction that we're seeing and the push that we're seeing from the industry is really starting to take off. I think that there's been a lot of narratives saying that electric will never be possible, and maybe we should go with hydrogen or with biofuels. It's been so many different technologies, and what we're starting to see now is that we're seeing that more and more people are now saying, okay, electric is available now. It can be made cheaper now. So, let's go for that. And I mean, we'll see moving forward. And again, hydrogen can be great for some use cases as well. It's just that you need to look into the application.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Linnéa, for joining us. And thank you for listening to us about the future of electronic freight and Einride. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.